My name is Sarah Ann Willett. I am the data maven, I guess, of Iowa COVID-19 Tracker. I have been tracking and analyzing infectious disease data for 5 years now. I actually, off the top of my head, do not know how many days we've been in isolation, but that won't take very long because my phone does know. Tomorrow is our 1800th day sitting in isolation. I have a primary immunodeficiency called common variable immune deficiency, which is very rare and affects around 1 in 35-ish thousand people. So I am the unicorn that you never see in public. I started tracking COVID data in Iowa in 2020 because we went to isolation. My husband is a researcher and we wanted to know what was going on. So we started analyzing data. He did it from an Alzheimer's perspective. I did it from an infectious disease and epidemiology perspective. And over the past 5 years, we've published 18 papers and together tried to help the rest of Iowa as well as the United States stay informed about COVID-19, about influenza A, and now H5N1 is rising. So we are both continuing to help our communities, both together and separately.
Great. And thank you for all your dedication. So update us all on what's going on now with the influenzas and the COVIDs and all the things.
So we had already peaked our technical winter wave. That was back in late December, but we are having a resurgence of a peak a little bit earlier than we were expecting originally. Some modelers that I work with, Dr. Joe Eastman and Dr. Mike Herger, they had predicted that our next peak for the spring wave was going to happen sometime in late April, early May, but it looks like it's going to be a little bit earlier. It's going to happen in April. And we're already starting to see certain segments of the United States rising for COVID, especially my part of the world up here in the middle Atlantic. When it comes to influenza A, this is the worst influenza season that the United States has seen since 2009. We have rising metrics across the whole country, especially in rural areas, but also in urban areas like Newark, which is about 20 minutes north of me. Newark specifically has H5N1 showing up in the wastewater, which, for those who don't know about Newark, New Jersey, it's an extremely urban area. There are no farms, there are no backyard chickens, things like that. It's houses on top of houses, restaurants, stores, businesses, people everywhere. So when a signal for influenza A H5N1 shows up in an urban area, that starts to worry a person like me who pays attention to where in the United States we're seeing outbreaks in cows, chickens, other types of poultry like ducks, which happened on Long Island earlier this month, which was also very concerning with 100,000 ducks needing to be depopulated. I think, and I'm not alone in this in the infectious disease community, I think we are heading toward a new pandemic of H5N1. We
Bird
know
flu.
what oh yes, bird flu, exactly. Avian
Thank you.
influenza. Yeah. Yeah. So I think in media, people are referring to it as avian influenza or bird flu. But on the infectious disease side in public health, we try to think about seasonal influenzas like H1N1 or H3N2 or influenza B and novel influenzas like H5N1, because we as people have gotten influenza many times in our lives. All of the different types of strains that we get every year across the United States, our bodies are either vaccinated against or hopefully vaccinated against and have infection-based immunity from the last time you had it. But very few people in the United States and in the world have proper protection against H5N1 because most of us have never had it. There's, at last count, the CDC had 67 Americans who've tested positive and been confirmed for avian influenza or bird flu, which means there's 335 million more Americans who haven't had those infections and don't have any kind of protection right now.
Do you advocate vaccines?
Absolutely. Every single person should get their seasonal influenza vaccine every year, but especially now, because the goal of vaccinating against seasonal influenza is to properly protect and prevent severity for those, but also One of the things we most worry about in public health is a person getting infected with a seasonal influenza virus like H1N1 and H5N1. So those two influenzas can learn from each other. That's called a recombination event, where H5N1 would take some of the mutations that H1N1 has, specifically the ability to mutate and transmit between people very, very fast. We don't want that to happen. So the goal of seasonal influenza vaccination, especially this year, is to prevent people from getting infected with both. Another layer of protection, one I personally engage in every time we prepare to open our front door, is wearing a respirator, either a KN95, an N95, a KN100. Some people like me, being as high risk as I am, I wear something called a PAPR, a personal air powered respirator. It provides me with HEPA filtration. It's basically like a huge helmet that I wear so that I can go into risky environments like pharmacies, groceries, doctor's appointments, and I come out without getting infected with anything. Most people don't need that. Most people can be properly protected with an N95 whenever they're in shared airspaces.
Watching the political disarray currently, what kind of effect is that going to have on our protection? And I know we don't have enough time here for all of the details on that, but infectious diseases, who's going to warn us, who's going to test, and all of that kind of stuff that the government does.
Yes. So, based on the last media report that I read with regard to the CDC, their goal is to fire 50% of the staff, which has lots and lots of negative implications for not just studying and understanding infectious diseases and other chronic diseases as well here in the United States, but around the world as well, because the CDC has multiple like sister CDCs in every country in the world. Specifically when it comes to COVID and H5N1, we've already seen from the administration an opposition to people even knowing that this is happening. It wasn't last Friday, it was a Friday before. The CDC took down all of their data, just disappeared from the existence of the internet. And myself and a number of other researchers like Angela Rasmussen and Charles Gaba, we quickly went and downloaded everything we possibly could. And Charles Gaba actually has the whole data set as it stood on the 31st of January in the Internet Archive, which is wonderful. Since then, we've gotten back some data. We don't have COVID wastewater yet. We also don't have like H5 wastewater from the CDC either, or Mpox for that matter. And by firing or laying off half of the CDC staff, personally, from my viewpoint, it's concerning because these are the people that clean and de-identify data rolling in about individuals who are getting tested at their doctor's office or their emergency room. If we don't have people who are cleaning and protecting the data around these people, will they release the data? No, I don't believe so, because there are a lot of laws against releasing identifiable data, a person's name, their address, sometimes even their county. For instance, like in rural Northwest Iowa, some counties have a very low population, and we don't have a lot of data on those counties because there aren't that many people. There aren't enough people to protect the individual person who may develop H5N1 avian influenza. From a data analytics perspective, for me, if they could maintain the data sources, and like that would be the only part of the CDC that would still be functioning, myself, Dr. Eastman, Dr. Herger, Dr. Rasmussen, we could all analyze these data and then function as an additional CDC, just publishing what we've been doing for the past 5 years. But I don't even know if we're going to have that. And at this point in time, whenever I'm talking with people, my recommendation is to assume that we always have high transmission for everything, because we don't really know right now. And obviously the result of that is wear a respirator, stay home when you're sick. Even if you feel a little bit off, take a remote work day. Try to not go places that are super high risk where there are going to be tons and tons of people, especially right now, because we are, again, in the worst influenza season that we've seen since, oh gosh, it's been 15 years. I would recommend caution for everybody right now.
How can people stay in contact with you with your information?
So my website right now is freely accessible. All you have to do is go to iowacovid19tracker.org and sign up for an account. Uh, what I do on the back end is I'll verify that that's a person versus potentially a Twitter or social media bot, because we don't know anymore who's on the internet, who is a real person and isn't a real person. I'll verify, I'll approve, and you can come in and you can access all of the wastewater data that I've accumulated over the last 5 years. Same thing for case data, deaths, HPAI in animals, avian influenza, uh, information about chronic diseases, as well as other types of infectious diseases, pertussis especially. I track that as well. And hospital rates for SARS as well as for influenza A.
And do you accept support, financial support?
I do. I have a Patreon. It's Sarah Ann Willette is my Patreon. I, I do this because I want everybody to be safe. I I break even with the support that I've had over the last 5 years. I break even for my fees and such for website as well as Tableau. I appreciate people supporting me. I really, the biggest support anyone can give me is to wear a respirator and not get sick with infectious diseases. That's the thing that keeps me going every day, is other people staying safe.
Can you think of anything else, Sarah, that you'd like to?
I have a Twitter account as well as a Facebook account. These are also great ways to contact me. I tend to respond to most messages within a day, usually. Uh, Really, in the end, right now with the new administration, we don't know what the next 6 to 12 months are going to look like, which is concerning and scary because we are also seeing a rise in H5N1, both the United States, but all around the world in animals. And the more animals that get sick, the more people can get sick. So, right now, the best thing I can do is recommend caution, wearing a respirator, and doing your best to stay healthy.
Great. Well, many, many thanks for all you do, Sarah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna
I'm glad I do it.